I found the hidden camera in a smoke detector that didn't belong in our bedroom, and when I pulled the SD card, I watched my husband of 10 years systematically dismantle my sanity while I slept. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't developing early-onset Alzheimer's at 34. I was being hunted by the man who promised to love me until death. For the last 6 months, my life has been a blur of misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, and bruises I couldn't explain. Mark was always there to catch me. He was the perfect doting husband. He'd sigh with that pitying look in his eyes and tell me, "It's okay, Sarah. You just forgot again. I'll handle the bills. You just rest." He convinced my parents I was struggling. He convinced our friends I was depressed. He even convinced my doctor that I was hallucinating. But 3 nights ago, I found the camera. I was dusting the crown molding when I noticed the smoke detector in the corner of our master suite. We have a central alarm system. We don't have battery-operated units. I took it down, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Inside was a tiny lens and a high-capacity memory card. I waited until Mark left for his late-night gym session before I plugged it into my laptop. I expected to find evidence of an affair. I expected to see another woman in my bed. I would have preferred that. What I saw instead was a horror movie. The footage from Tuesday night showed me fast asleep. Mark walked into the room, leaned over me, and checked my pupils. Then he went to my nightstand. He took my daily vitamins out of the organizer and replaced them with white powder from a vial in his pocket. Then he did something that made me vomit. He picked up my phone, used my thumb to unlock it while I was unconscious, and began deleting messages from my sister. He sent a text from my phone to my boss saying I was resigning effective immediately due to personal health struggles. He sat there in the dark, smiling as he typed out my professional suicide. But that wasn't even the most insane part. Wait until you hear what happened when he thought the medicine had fully kicked in. The next morning, I remembered waking up feeling like my head was filled with wet cotton. I remembered crying because I couldn't find my ring. Mark had held me. He had told me I probably took it off to wash my hands and forgot where I put it. He told me I was getting worse, and maybe we should look into assisted living options just to be safe. I watched 3 weeks of footage that night. I saw him moving my things while I slept. I saw him whispering in my ear while I was in a deep, drug-induced coma, telling me that everyone hated me, telling me that I was a burden. He was literally brainwashing me in my sleep. Why? That was the question that kept me from screaming. We had a good life. I worked as a senior software architect. I made 3 times what he made as a consultant. We had a massive house, 2 cars, and a solid savings account. Then it hit me. My grandfather's estate. My grandfather had passed away 8 months ago. He left me a trust fund worth $4 million. The catch? I couldn't touch the principal until I was 35, which was only 4 months away. But there was a clause. If I was declared mentally incompetent, the control of the trust would go to my legal guardian, my husband. But the pills and the trust fund were just the beginning. What he did next made the hair on my neck stand up. I realized I couldn't let him know I knew. If he knew I found the camera, I didn't know what he'd do. If he was willing to drug me for months, was he willing to do something more permanent? I had to play the part. I had to be the crazy, fading wife for a little longer while I gathered my own evidence. The next morning, Mark came into the room with a tray of breakfast. He had that concerned mask on again. "How are you feeling today, honey? You had a rough night. You were screaming in your sleep again." I hadn't been screaming. I saw the footage. I slept like a corpse because of whatever he was giving me. "I feel foggy, Mark. I can't remember if I called my sister back." "You did?" He lied smoothly, stroking my hair. "You told her you didn't want to see her for a while. You were pretty upset with her." My stomach turned. He was isolating me. "My sister Chloe is my best friend. We haven't gone 3 days without talking in 10 years. I checked my phone later that day. He had blocked her number and deleted her from my recent calls. I started faking it. When he gave me my vitamins, I used a trick I learned from old movies. I tucked them into my cheek and pretended to swallow. As soon as he left the room, I spat them into a tissue. I needed to know what they were. I went to a private lab across town while he was at work, telling them I found these pills in my teenager's room and needed them identified. The results came back 48 hours later. It was a cocktail of heavy-duty sedatives and scopolamine. Scopolamine is known as the devil's breath. It makes people suggestible. It wipes their short-term memory. It turns them into zombies. He wasn't just making me look crazy. He was making me a puppet. But even after finding out about the drugs, I wasn't prepared for who walked through my front door on Thursday afternoon. I was looking through the hidden camera footage from the living room. I'd hidden one of my own in a bookshelf. When I saw her, my best friend and maid of honor, Tiffany. She didn't knock. She had a key. She walked straight into the kitchen and wrapped her arms around Mark. "Is she out?" Tiffany asked, her voice dripping with venom. "She's upstairs, napping," Mark said, laughing. "The dose I gave her this morning should keep her under until at least 4. We're almost there, Tiff. The lawyer says the competency hearing is scheduled for next month. Once the judge sees the medical reports I've been faking, the trust is ours." "I can't wait to get out of this house," Tiffany sighed, leaning against the counter. "It smells like her. How do you stand sleeping next to that walking ghost every night?" "I don't," Mark said, kissing her. "I wait until she's out cold. Then I spend the night in the guest room or on the couch. It's a job, babe. And the payday is $4 million. I can play the grieving husband for a few more weeks." I was sitting in my car 3 blocks away, watching this live on my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the device. My husband and my best friend weren't just having an affair. They were conspirators in a plot to steal my life and my inheritance. They were talking about me like I was already dead, like I was just an obstacle to be cleared. But if they thought I was going to be a victim, they clearly forgot who I was before they started drugging me. You don't become a senior architect by being weak. I needed a plan. A direct confrontation would only lead to them gaslighting me further, or worse, getting violent. I had to be smarter. I had to outplay them at their own game. I contacted a high-end private investigator and a lawyer who specialized in white-collar crime and domestic abuse. I showed them the footage. I showed them the lab results of the pills. My lawyer, a shark named Elena, looked at me with pure steel in her eyes. "We could go to the police now," she said. "But with the scopolamine in your system for so long, they might try to argue your evidence is part of your delusions. We need something undeniable. We need a confession on tape where they admit to the drugging." "I can get that," I said. For the next week, I played the part of the fading wife to perfection. I would forget where the bathroom was. I would stare blankly at the wall for hours. I watched Mark and Tiffany through my hidden cameras. They were getting sloppy. They were so confident in my decline that they stopped being careful. They would have sex in the living room while I was asleep upstairs. They would look over bank statements and plan their move to Europe. The retained bridge here is that while they were planning their future, I was dismantling their past. I found out Mark hadn't been consulting for years. He'd lost his job 3 years ago and had been living off my salary, funneling money into a secret account Tiffany managed. They had already stolen over $200,000 from our joint savings. But that wasn't even the most insane part. Wait until you hear what happened when I invited our entire family over for a special announcement. I told Mark I wanted to have a final Sunday dinner. I told him I felt my mind slipping away and I wanted one last good memory with everyone before I went into the facility he had been suggesting. He loved the idea. He thought it was the perfect way to show everyone how unstable I was and how supportive he was being. "That's a beautiful idea, Sarah," he said, his voice full of fake sympathy. "I'll invite your parents, my parents, and Tiffany. We'll make it a celebration of you." I smiled, looking as vacant as possible. Yes, a celebration. Sunday arrived. I spent the morning confused. I let Mark lead me around the house. I let him remind me to take my pills. Of course, I palmed them. I felt sharper than I had in months. The fog had lifted, and in its place was a cold, hard rage. My parents arrived first. They looked heartbroken. Mark had been feeding them lies for months about my condition. My mother held my hand, tears in her eyes. "We're here for you, sweetie. Whatever you need." "I know, Mom," I whispered. "I have something to show everyone later." Tiffany arrived last, wearing a dress I had bought her for her birthday. She had the audacity to hug me and tell me she was so sorry for what I was going through. I almost bit my tongue through to keep from screaming. Dinner was a somber affair. Mark played the martyr. He talked about how hard the last few months had been, how he had stayed by my side through the darkness. He even toasted to my courage. "I'd like to say something," I said, standing up. My voice was steady, too steady. Mark flicked a glance at Tiffany. He looked confused. I wasn't supposed to be this lucid. "I've been thinking a lot about memory," I began, walking toward the large television in our dining room, "about how easy it is to lose the truth when someone is rewriting it for you. Mark, you've been so worried about my brain. You even put up those extra smoke detectors to keep me safe, right?" Mark's face went pale. "Sarah, honey, maybe you should sit down. You're getting overwhelmed." "Oh, I'm not overwhelmed, Mark. I'm enlightened." I picked up the remote. I decided to make a little slideshow of our best moments from the last month. You know, for the memories I'm supposedly losing. The screen flickered to life. It didn't show photos of vacations or birthdays. It showed the footage from the bedroom. It showed Mark leaning over my unconscious body, drugging my water. The room went silent. I heard my father's fork hit his plate with a loud clatter. "What is this?" my mother whispered. "That's Mark," I said, my voice like ice. "That's Mark, making sure I don't wake up while he deletes my life from my phone." I hit the next button. The screen showed the living room. It showed Mark and Tiffany on the sofa. It showed them laughing about the competency hearing. It showed Tiffany saying she couldn't wait to spend my grandfather's money in Italy. Tiffany stood up, her chair screeching against the hardwood. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like. This is a deep fake. Mark, tell her." But Mark couldn't say anything. He was staring at the screen, his mouth hanging open. He looked like a landed fish gasping for air. "I also have the lab reports," I said, tossing the papers onto the center of the table. "Scopolamine and benzodiazepines. In my system. Given to me by my husband. I've already sent copies to the police and my lawyer. In fact, they should be pulling into the driveway right about now." As if on cue, blue and red lights began to flash against the dining room windows. Mark tried to bolt for the back door, but my father, a retired contractor who still spent 5 days a week in the gym, tackled him into the china cabinet. The sound of breaking glass was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. But the fallout was far from over. What the police found in Mark's secret office made the drugging look like a minor offense. As the police led Mark and Tiffany away in handcuffs, the house felt suddenly, hauntingly quiet. My parents were in shock. My mother was sobbing, clutching my hand as if I might disappear. But I felt a strange sense of calm. The crazy woman was gone. The architect was back. The investigation that followed was a whirlwind. Because I had the footage and the lab results, the district attorney moved fast. They searched the house and found Mark's secret office, a locked room in the basement I thought was just for his consulting files. Inside, they found more than just files. They found a how-to guide on inducing chemical dementia. He had researched it for a year before he started. They found journals where he recorded my symptoms daily, noting which doses worked best to keep me compliant, but not comatose. But the real kicker? Mark hadn't just been targeting my trust fund. He had taken out 3 different life insurance policies on me in the last 6 months. Each one had a double indemnity clause for accidental death. He wasn't just planning to commit me to a facility. He was planning to kill me. He He was waiting until the competency hearing was over so that the payout would go directly to him without any legal interference from my family. And Tiffany? She wasn't just a mistress. She was a former pharmacy technician. She was the one supplying the drugs. She had been stealing them from her workplace for months. She was the one who taught him how to administer the scopolamine so it wouldn't be easily detected in a standard blood test. Even with all this evidence, Mark tried one last, desperate move to ruin me from behind bars. While awaiting trial, Mark tried to sue me for divorce and half of our assets, claiming that I had trapped him into a confession and that the footage was illegally obtained. He tried to argue that his research was for a thriller novel he was writing and that the drugging was a kink we both consented to. He actually had the nerve to tell a judge that I was a willing participant in a medical role play and that I had turned on him because I was having a mental breakdown. For a week, the media picked it up. The role play defense, they called it. I had to endure strangers on the internet debating whether I was a victim or a mastermind. But he forgot one thing. I'm a software architect. I track everything. I produced the logs from my smartwatch. It had been recording my heart rate and sleep cycles for the entire 6 months. It showed my heart rate dropping to dangerously low levels every night exactly 20 minutes after he gave me my vitamins. It showed that I was in a state of deep, non-responsive sleep during the times he claimed we were role-playing. You can't fake heart rate data from a device synced to a cloud server. The judge threw out his suit and fast-tracked the criminal trial. Mark was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and financial fraud. Tiffany got 15 years for her role as an accomplice and for the theft of controlled substances. The day the sentencing was handed down, I went home and ripped that fake smoke detector out of the ceiling with a hammer. I smashed it into 1,000 pieces on the driveway. It's been a year now. I still have trouble sleeping sometimes. I still check my water glass twice before I take a sip. I still have a hard time trusting people when they tell me I forgot something. But the fog is gone. My mind is sharp. And that $4 million trust fund? I used a portion of it to open a foundation that helps victims of domestic gaslighting and chemical abuse. I'm not a walking ghost anymore, Tiffany. I'm the one who stayed behind to tell the story. Mark's final appeal was denied last week. He'll be serving at least 85% of his sentence. Tiffany is reportedly not doing well in prison and has tried to flip on Mark multiple times to get her sentence reduced, but there's nothing left to tell. My divorce was finalized, and I've officially reclaimed my maiden name. I sold the house, the one that smelled like me, and moved to a city where nobody knows my story. I'm finally breathing air that isn't poisoned. If the person you trust most in the world started slowly changing your reality, how long would it take for you to stop trusting yourself and start trusting them? At what point does love become a weapon of gaslighting? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one of them.